Not too distracting. Okay. Actually, we could have mined it in the shop.
You went where?
We met in Bumilenge.
Oh, we did? In Bumilenge?
In Bumilenge, 2013.
Oh, with Samira.
Samira, yeah.
Yes.
She said salam.
Yes, I remember Samira, yes, mashallah. Abdullah.
Yes.
Okay.
You keep it well?
Yes. Now I remember, yes, mashallah.
Samira said salam.
All right, walaikum salam. I remember. Walaikum salam. How are you?
Pleasure to meet yourself.
Thank you. Ameen. I'm already 80 by the moon.
May He give you mine.
Ameen.
I don't know whether he was or not.
Very good, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
It was honor to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are very
From Nottingham?
Nottingham, you're up. So familiar with your voice.
Well, I'm happy to be here tonight, and let's hope there'll be a benefit, inshallah.
You will give us opportunity to ask the question.
Yes, there'll be many,
Afterwards.
many time, yes, yeah, many time. Yeah. Okay.
If you press the button,
You have 2 more minutes. Nothing have time. The hall should have been filled already. Pakistani time.
Inshallah, we'll start in 1 minute.
I like that. Walaikum salam, Nadir.
You love to turn up at the last minute, how do you love to turn up at the last minute?
We start on time. We start on time, and those who come late, they come late. Yeah?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wal alihi wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum everyone.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, thank you very much for coming here today and making Sheikh Imran's first visit to Nottingham a nice warm welcome. It's always nice to sort of see everyone turn up. I'm Faisal. I'm going to be your host for today, and I'm the founder of No, which is a non-profit education institute. So we're going to be speaking about a very interesting and quite hot topic actually, which is the subject of the education system. Now, as a sort of fairly new parent myself, it's a subject I was quite keen to have Sheikh speak on, and I'm actually really excited to hear to see what he's got to have to say on it, because this is the first time he's actually speaking on this subject. So, alhamdulillah, we're very, very lucky to have him here. So let's begin with some blessings and have Brother Nasir start with some salawats, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا صدق الله العظيم.
ما شاء الله ناصر، ما شاء الله.
Glad to hear for that, Nasir, for a beautiful recitation. Very relevant to the subject as well, so that's really good. So I'm just going to talk through the schedule. So obviously we'll start with the introduction, then I'm going to speak for about maybe 10 minutes or so, just on a few stories about Sheikh Imran and about what we're doing at No. Then the main event, we'll have Sheikh Imran about 7:15 or so. He'll speak for about an hour and 5 minutes. We'll see how we're tracking. If we're tracking on time, we can have a little 5-minute break. If not, we'll go straight into the question and answer, and then we'll end with the dua and some closing comments. And so this is now the boring stuff. If we have any, the event was sort of fully booked, so I'm sure people will be coming sort of late. If we do have any people who come, if you just stand sort of towards the back, that's that. With books, all of Sheikh Imran's books are towards the back. So if you know, then missing from a collection, you can do that. In terms of the fire exit, so I'm going to be at air hostess now. It's actually just straight out the door and to the right, and we just have to go straight down the window, down the staircase. So bathrooms are straight directly outside. Food and drink is available in the cafe downstairs. The cafe closes at around about 8:45. So anything you want, get them. Obviously, phones on silent, please. And with the Q&A, obviously we know that Sheikh has got a wealth of knowledge, but we do ask that we keep it on the subject, please. So that's the kind of sort of general information. So we're going to get the Sheikh on through, inshallah, but I actually wanted to start off with a little story about the first time I met Sheikh Imran. So this was 2010, 2011. So I had a lot more black hair, a lot less belly. And so I went to South Africa, to Cape Town. And I went with a couple of cousins, my brother and friends. And I mean, before I went, I was kind of, probably, I was famously Jawahiri Muslim. I was got fairly practicing, decent level of knowledge, quite attached to the mosque. I didn't know what understanding was that deep. But anyway, got out there, and that week, honestly, blew my mind. It was, what actually, I think the thing that hit me the most was the fact that all of a sudden, here's a group of individuals, very intelligent, and they're talking about Islam in a way I've never ever heard before. They're talking about how Islam contains the answers to the economic problem, the environmental problem, the social problem. And I thought, I've never heard about Islam like this before. I mean, up until that point, it was always, praying and fasting and getting closer to Allah and things like that. But I've never heard about it as an active force for good. And obviously, all of this is through the lens of the Quran, under the wisdom and tutelage of Sheikh Imran and the scholars that were there, who had given like a framework and methodology to sort of to allow people to sort of think for themselves. So that was obviously amazing, just that alone. I think the thing that stands with me the most, especially being from Nottingham, is that the diversity of the people. Because there were 150 people or so there, from maybe 10, 12 different countries. And there's people there who would say, oh, these guys are Sufi, these guys are Brahmi, these guys are Salafi, these guys are Tablighi, these guys are Diabali, right? But everyone was actually, there weren't like the differences affecting, they were actually very united, talking about the big issues at hand. And so that was, for me, that was, I'd never really encountered that thing before. And it made such an impact that I always say that trip was a sort of a chance to change the course of my life from that point. So obviously, many of you guys from Nottingham, you know that we have a lot of amazing people here, a lot of sincerity, a lot of hard work. But sometimes we're kind of quite divided, but more than that, I think what we lack most is sort of really big picture thinking. Like a growth mindset. Sometimes we argue about things that don't really matter, and look, we are quite narrow in our approach. So look, the elders sort of came in, they built the foundation, they responded to their challenges of their day. We didn't have mosques, they built mosques. But the challenges of today are very, very different. Like, who's going to take it to the next level? And I think sometimes that's the problem, that they've kind of stayed quite stagnant. And so what happened at that point was, I felt, I was quite hooked. There was nothing really out there like this. That, so I was like, I need to find out more. And so what I did was that, look, I wanted to share some of that experience with my local community. So back in 2012, I put on an event, Sheikh Imran did a live link up, and had local scholars talking about issues like Islam and food, Islam and health, Islam and the money system, and Islam and media. And then sort of the intellectual response around that. And what was amazing was the response. So that the encouraging response kind of led the organisation to be set up. We had sort of 300 people attend on the day, and since then we started being quite active. We started having quite a big online following. We started doing interviews and podcasts, and lectures and articles and blogs and all sorts. And so, alhamdulillah, so things were going good. So why have I given you a bit of a backstory? I think there's two things that come to mind. First of all, the importance and power of a paradigm shift. I think that's the first thing that hit me. I was sort of going with the flow and very 9 to 5 and corporate and all that kind of stuff. And having that sort of culture shock in a good way, sort of disrupted my towards a different purpose. And then secondly, it was more that I realized what knowledge, like true proper knowledge, is supposed to do for you. What it's supposed to do is actually to transform you. So I always give this example, and it's a bit of a cliche, but if you've got someone like Malcolm X, he is the perfect example to use because he was obviously in jail, criminal, accepted Islam, started consuming knowledge, reading, and it elevates him to influential speaker, a leader that changed the world. And his impact still felt to this day. Now contrast that to, that's what proper knowledge can do and that's what it should do. And if it doesn't, maybe it's just information, maybe it's not really knowledge. So now think about some of the knowledge that we learn at schools, in our university, and sadly maybe in the mosque. Does it really transform you? How much of it can you remember? How much of it can you retain? How much of it do you actually implement? So what have I been up to since 2014? Actually, that last event that we had was here in 2014. So quite a lot. So with now, what we've been doing is that we've actually completely pivoted for a number of reasons. So one of the big frustrations for me was like no one was growing, but it got to a bit of a, it sort of started to, it stopped having the impact that I wanted for two reasons. One is that I think we became typecast a little bit like an events organisation. People, when do the next event, when do the next event, whereas that was something very small that we did. And the second thing is that ultimately what we really wanted was to, for people to go through that experience and that transformation that I went through and that other people have gone through. But what people had kind of felt was because we talk about real issues, and the world is a bit of a depressing place, but it became a little bit doom and gloom. So what I did was that I thought, okay, right, first of all, do we want to continue this? And if so, how can we do it properly? So the main thing strategically was that I wanted to try and solve something that was a huge problem, and also help us unlock the vast potential that the Ummah has, and to allow people to critically think for themselves. The huge problem I wanted to tackle actually was the education system itself, for a number of reasons. I think firstly, it's not fit for purpose. The education system that we have is 120 years old. It was built for the industrial age, so it was designed to create workers, not thinkers. There's also a big part of how the British colonizers, so they removed the active elements. They removed our history. So we lost control of our narrative. And even in the UK now, like, it's quite tired. It's a bit inflexible, it's structured. Everything is all dependent upon, if you've got this grade, then you're intelligent. If you haven't, if you're not good at maths, then you're there's point. That, which is ridiculous because some of the most intelligent people I've ever met are self-taught, they dropped out of school, and I think the biggest thing really for me is education has become godless and soulless. The spirit's been taken out of learning. So what I did was I took it all offline for a while. I said, right, let me look. So I read into stuff. I studied different educational models, micro-learning, P2P, EdTech, all the latest kind of trends. I also read about sort of tech platforms. I studied like Airbnb and Uber, and how did these guys scale? The reason I did that was because a scholar said to me once, look, if you really want to disrupt something that's in place, how you're going to do it is not top down unless you're like amazing leader, unless you're like vertical. You're going to do it through bottom up, through mobilizing the masses. So if you look at what's happened with retail's dying. Why? Because Amazon, eBay allow people to, shop between themselves. So, and also what I found with some of the problems with learning, like retention is obviously a problem. So the best way to retain knowledge is to teach it. 10% of things that you retain 10% of what you read, 95% of what you teach. Obviously we have the problem of attention span today as well. And lots of people learn in different ways. Some people learn better through reading, some people learn better through video. Some people are structured through academia, some people prefer informal. And so I want to introduce you what we've done at Know and what we've become. It's an education platform. This is where people can offer short, bite-sized lessons, either by video or text, or by offering full online courses. I just want to share an experience with you here.
We all have more access to knowledge than ever before. How do we make the most of it? Imagine a world where you could learn anything from anyone in a simple way. Knowledge and education has always been the very foundation that entire civilizations have blossomed upon, especially in the golden age of Islam, where the passionate pursuit of knowledge led humanity to excel in every field. But fast forward to today, we find ourselves in a world where we may have more access to knowledge than ever, but less wisdom. Here's the problem. We struggle to retain information. Our attention span is short. Most of our learning is still happening in a rigid, outdated school system which is centuries old. In an era of fake news and information overload, the need to be able to think for ourselves is greater than ever. What's more, whatever happened to learning for its true purpose, to build our intellect and to learn about the world? At the same time, we're undergoing a digital revolution in almost every area of our lives, be it travel, shopping, or even accommodation. These traditional industries have been disrupted by those who believed in the power of many people sharing, so that anyone could be a taxi, a retailer, or a hotel. We believe in the same thing. At Know, we believe that everyone has something to teach and everyone has something to learn. We want to spark this much-needed educational revolution through our social education platform. Through our bite-sized nodes, everyone can connect with anyone and become someone in the know very quickly. Imagine understanding the essence of any subject in just 3 minutes or less. We all have an expertise in something, no matter how trivial, and explaining it simply is the most effective way to retain and master what you already know. You can also follow your favorite content creators and then take courses that are launched by them or others in those 6 categories. Knowledge is not one size fits all. We all have different interests, different ways of understanding, and different attention spans. We also have different backgrounds, experience, and expertise. Our strength lies in our diversity as a community. We can learn something from everyone. Knowledge transforms people. Transforms people and then change the world. Sign up at know.com today and play your part in changing the world.
So the platform has been created as something that's open source. So anyone with expertise can contribute towards their field, and slowly but surely we can start building components. As you may know, platforms get more and more valuable the more content that you put on there. So eventually we can start putting things like homeschooling curriculums on there, and can start creating your own courses and earning for yourself, inshallah. So the reason I want to share this is, first of all, I want to give you an update because you might have not heard of us for so long, and so this is what we're kind of working behind the scenes. Secondly, because of the problems with education, and sometimes it's, we think, oh my God, what can we do? So there are people that are trying to sort of make an alternative. And most importantly, I think the seed for this was sown all the way back in South Africa. And so this is why I want to make today's topic all about the education system, because this is one thing that Muslims actually do have in common. They all love education, want the kids to be educated, and all these kind of things. But often it's it's the reasons that I want them to have a great job and things like that, not necessarily because this is kind of our purpose. So with all that, so I invite you to sign up, create content, benefit from it, volunteer, help us out, and just check it out. So I mean, one of the things I learned from Airbnb was that they started off with their own house, then they did the neighbour's house, and it grew from there. So I think that's the way. If we want to build long term. So with all that said, I'm going to start. I'm going to invite Sheikh Imran to speak, inshallah. So I'm going to just put the mic on.
الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم خاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ونزلنا عليك الكتاب تبيانا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة وبشرى للمسلمين صدق الله العظيم. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, as we greet you in the city of Nottingham in Britain with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am delighted that we started on time, exactly 7 o'clock. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Our topic is one of tremendous importance: knowledge, the system of education, and Dajjal. And tonight we will look at the knowledge and the system of education in our civilization, particularly as it affects the child and the adolescent until he reaches to become the adult, the process of learning. But tomorrow night, we would like to look at the house of knowledge in Islam, higher Islamic learning, because it is my opinion at the age of 80. I used to say 77 until I got a knock on my head. The Quran knocked me on my head and said to me, but Allah says that He gave you the moon, لِتَعْلَمُوا عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ, that you would count the years with the moon. So Imran, how come you're using the sun? So I got the knock on my head. So I'm now 80 years of age by the moon. And I have located this conclusion that the world of Islamic scholarship, our ulama, our maulanas and shuyukh and muftis, ustaz, etc., while there is still so much sincerity and dedication in their ranks, they have not succeeded in responding to the challenges of this age in which we live. They don't even understand. They don't even understand the age in which we live, far less to be able to respond to it. And this has been a devastating state for us. It has led to our collapse as a civilization because our ulama have failed us in respect of this subject. To understand the reality which confronts us today and to go to the Quran to respond to that reality. Is there anyone here present who would differ with me that the most critically important issue facing the world of Islam today, no, more than that, the whole world, is the subject of money? And money is not only the banking system, it is also the monetary system. People don't even know what I'm talking about. They don't even know what I'm talking about when I use the word the monetary system. This is the most critically important subject of all facing this ummah and facing mankind today. And has the Darul Uloom contributed even this much to the study of the subject and to responding to what is Pakistan's most critical moment today in its history? Nothing from the Darul Uloom, nothing from the scholars of Islam, nothing at all. But it's worse than that. Because Allah has been kind to me, and I have been able to study the subject and from the Quran to be able not only to explain but also to offer guidance. Imagine my astonishment when I find that they will not only not accept what I'm teaching, but also reject me and call me names and shut the doors of the masjid on me. And so we are certainly in a very, very dangerous situation today. And no amount of boxing gloves, Deobandi, Brelvi, Sufi, Salafi, this, that boxing match is going to change our condition. No. And so tomorrow we will look at the house of knowledge in Islam, which is producing our scholars. And then on the day of Jummah, I don't call it Friday, because you may not be aware of it. Friday is the day for the worship of a Scandinavian goddess named Fry. Yes, so I prefer to use the name Yawmul Jummah, Jummah Kadid. So on Jummah, Yawmul Jummah, in Leicester, and I understand Leicester is less than 1 hour from Nottingham.
Yes.
Yeah. I will be speaking on the Quran and how to begin with the Quran to reconstruct the house of knowledge, a higher knowledge in Islam. And the subject is the Quran and the moon, methodology for reciting the Quran, which is the first step to the second, which is the Quran and the stars, methodology for study of the Quran. So let us begin with Allah's blessed name and direct our attention to knowledge and the system of education in our civilization and what Dajjal is doing, what is the danger which he presents to us. Our Prophet said, Sallallahu Ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, he said, teach the child from infancy until the age of 7. Teach the child with love. That is the teacher, to teach with love. And he said from age 7 until age 14, teach the child by disciplining the child, establishing firm habits in the child that will remain with the child all through his or her life. Like the most important one of all is to perform your salat regularly. The most important one of all is to recite the Quran every day. Eventually, at the age of 10, you would be reciting the whole Quran from cover to cover once a month. This is the second stage. And he said, after the child passes the age of 40, you cannot teach the child other than by becoming a friend. By becoming a friend of the child. This is the psychology of education that has come from Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. If we are to teach with love from childhood until age 7, then the child has to grow up in the arms of love. The child has to grow up in a stable home where love will be shown. And so Allah gives us a social system of the relationship between the male and the female, which makes sense for the home to be a stable home, to be a happy home, and for the child to grow up in the arms of security and of happiness. If Allah has blessed me today to have this profile around the world as a scholar of Islam, when I was born in a little island in the Caribbean, just off the coast of Venezuela, far, far, far removed from the world of Islam. If this has become possible in my life, it's because I started off in a happy home. I started off in a stable home with father and mother and children living together in a unit, a stable unit. I never had a part-time mother. Oh my gosh, Imran, now you're going on the wrong road. This is the road to trouble, huh? But I don't care 2 peanuts. I don't care 2 peanuts for those who cannot stomach the truth. I'm not here to preach Islam to please them. Who do they think they are? It doesn't matter to me how many they may be. And it doesn't matter to me what are the consequences of my proclaiming the truth. If I cannot proclaim the truth, tell me so, and I leave your dictatorship, and I go somewhere else where there is freedom. The most important thing of all for me is freedom. So tell me, when I no longer have freedom, I pack my bags and leave. But so long as I have freedom, I must proclaim the truth. I never had a part-time mother. My mother was at home, full-time. And that meant a lot in the psychology of education of the child. It gives to the child a certain internal security and the maintenance of an internal balance that is not disturbed. But when a child grows up in a broken home, and when Christmas time comes, he goes to the supermarket to buy Christmas cards, and he looks for one for mommy and her husband, and he looks for another one for daddy and his wife. Can you imagine the heart of that child? Christmas is coming. This is for them the greatest time of the year in this country. That child is growing up with a broken heart because that child came from a broken home. So if you want to damage a person, destroy him as a child. And he'll grow up to be a gangster. He'll grow up to take drugs. He'll become violent using firearms. And he'll enter into the world of promiscuity. And the child is only 14 and she already has her first abortion. They say, no, 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 no. You can't get married until you're 18. That's haram. But it's okay to have your first abortion at 14. And then the second abortion at 15. This is the destruction of the human being. And so our first argument for proper education and therefore for the construction of the house of knowledge is to try to ensure that the child grows up with love. And love means love in a home, a family. The one who created every human being and who created the water that we drink and who created the food that we eat and who created the air that we breathe and who gives us the light of the day and the darkness of the night, this is the one who says that he created the male and the female the way he created the night and the day. He says so in the Quran. And so night and day are like male and female. They complement each other. They're two halves that come together to make a whole. And the day has its functions to perform. Allah says, وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا, and I gave you the day so you can work and toil. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا, and I gave you the night for a different purpose, that you can have rest in the night. So they are functionally different. Similarly, the man and the woman, the male and the female are functionally different. And it's when father and mother fulfill their functions as male and female, as father and mother, that you can have a stable home and therefore a stable society. But when you come with this greatest achievement of modern Western civilization, which informs me, Imran, this is the greatest civilization it has ever been the good fortune of mankind to witness. And this civilization has come to replace all that came before it. Every civilization that came before this civilization is now the language that Toynbee used in his book, Civilization and Trial. He said, moribund and obsolete. He says, they have all been relegated to the museums of history, including Islamic civilization. Sounds like arrogance to me. And the greatest achievement of this civilization, and they cannot stop me from saying it, no, is for a man to marry another man and get a marriage certificate. But is Western civilization's greatest achievement. But even a fool would understand that you are disrupting the complementary roles of the male and the female. The family unit is being destroyed. The home is no longer going to be the home as Allah has arranged. And so the child who grows up in that broken home and the child who grows up in this bogus home is going to be a child who eventually will end up in a mental asylum, disoriented. And so we begin the process of education by returning to the home that Allah has ordained, and returning to the marital relationship that Allah has ordained. He gave to the father certain functional roles, and I'm not allowed to talk about it now. And he gave to the mother certain functional roles, and the modern feminist woman comes with a sword in her hand. Stop it, don't talk about it. And our response is, get lost, who are you? We are scholars of Islam, we've come to preach. Who are you to stop us? It doesn't matter to me if you're a Pakistani woman, you know, the modernized one. And Allah gave us marriage, a system of marriage, which gives you a stable home. And when a girl reached the age of puberty, now she can become pregnant. Only now does she qualify to be married, not before. To marry a girl who has not reached the age of puberty, you should be sent on a one-way ticket to Mars. Huh? You want to marry a girl who is only 6 years of age? Send them on a one-way ticket to Mars. But in addition to that, Allah speaks about rushd, a certain measure of maturity, not a PhD from MIT. And when once the girl has this age, she has reached the age of puberty, and she has a measure of maturity, so she can handle the home, the finances of the home. She's now, according to Allah's wisdom, she's ready for marriage. But today's world says we are more learned and intelligent than the Lord God himself. That's the brainwashing that we have to live with today. And so if you accept that no, she must reach the age of 18 before she can be married, you're wasting your time listening to me. We reject that. But when Dajjal sends the order, every single government in the whole world, including the world of Islam, have to enact legislation. I don't know if Pakistan did it, prohibiting marriage before she reaches the age of 18. What happens when girls get married early? We have early marriage. This has always been in all civilizations in history until Dajjal took over the world. Answer, you had more stable families. The marriages lasted. And you had bigger families. And people lived a happier life. And in this age of progress, yes, this the best age ever, with the best civilization it has ever been the good fortune of mankind to witness. Nearly every marriage is ending up in divorce. They meet each other and they pledge eternal love. And eternity lasts for 6 weeks. 6 months. And then it's his lawyer and her lawyer taking over. So is this progress? If we want to bring back education and reconstruction of the house of knowledge, we have to restore the stable home. And to restore the stable home, we've got to go back to the relationship between the male and female, and I don't have the time today to expand on this subject, but this is under attack around the world today. The relationship between the male and female in society and the role of women in society. The role of women in society. And as a consequence of this modernist thinking, Dajjal's modern feminist revolution, we are now in this state of debacle. When the child is in that early stage, up to the age of 7, The most important thing to be done in the process of education is to build the memory. If you build a vast memory bank, if I may be allowed to use that term, then that child can eventually emerge with an amazing versatility. He would not only become a medical doctor, he might also have engineering, he could have philosophy, he could have all these other subjects. What is the sky is the limit when you build the memory bank. And so we began education in Islam by trying intelligently so, sensibly so, to build the memory bank of the child, that the child would memorize and memorize and memorize. If the child is memorizing poetry, Urdu poetry, well, still it has some benefit. But if the child is memorizing the Quran, mashallah. And so this is what we did at that age, building the memory bank. And along comes Dajjal, and today I was lecturing in a place called Jambar in Java in Indonesia, maybe about 2-3 months ago. And there were about 1,000 students ranging from age 10 to age 15, 16. And I am addressing them every morning after Fajr and every night after Maghrib, 1,000 or more. And it went on for about maybe 2 weeks. So I said, all those who have a smartphone, put your hands up. And everybody put their hand up. I say, all those who don't have a smartphone, put your hands up. Maybe 1 or 2 who were too poor. In this country of such great poverty, every child already had a smartphone. And what is the smartphone doing to that child? Depriving the child of what could have been a chance for him to build his memory base at that early age. Okay, he's wasting his time with the smartphone. Dajjal is very sensible, very intelligent. He plans cunningly. And we are now experiencing something else. That as the child is subjected to the electromagnetic waves coming from the cell phone and the wireless internet and the cell phone towers and so on, and the smartphone, his memory is being damaged. Check it out. I checked it out. I take a group of little girls, 7, 8 years of age, in an Islamic camp, and I said, come, let's see. This is the name of the first surah. This is the name of the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth, only 5. Al-Fatiha, Al-Baqarah, Al-Imran, Al-Nisa, Al-Ma'idah. Now go, walk about, repeat it, come back after 5 minutes. They couldn't remember. They couldn't remember. The only ones who showed signs that the memory was still powerful are those who were not using the smartphone. When the child is in that age, the early age, he needs to be going outside and playing and jumping and running in the flower garden, enjoying the flowers. And if instead of that the child is hooked with a smartphone or a laptop, you're denying something else to the child. The process of education is that you not only begin with the memory, but you move on from the memory to something, oh my gosh, it is so beautiful. Something that Allah gave to us. Something called imagination. To build castles in the sky. Imagination. And the imagination of the child is triggered off by observing the signs of Allah externally. Nabi Muhammad ﷺ once came to the masjid in the morning weeping. He said two verses of the Quran, two passages came down last night. And they are so powerful in my heart that I could not help weeping of it. And in Surah Al Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks and he says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. That surely in everything that there is in Allah's creation, in the samawat and the earth, the material universe, there are signs, there are pages to be read. There are pages to be read, pages written by Allah. But in order for you to read those pages, you got to go out. You got to go amongst the flowers. You have to watch the river. You have to look up at the stars and the moon and the sun. You have to feel the breeze and look at the clouds. You have to look at the birds. And then the child's imagination is triggered off. And the child now begins to read pages written by Allah. But you deny that to the child by taking him away from the trees and the flowers, and he's hooked to that, you know it. In every house, in every room of every house now, the television set. And the only way father and mother could get some time for themselves is put the television on. And the children are hooked to watch television. And in the process, they are robbed of being able to interact with nature. This was what the Prophet was weeping about. And the Quran went on to say about those who observe and read the pages of nature that Allah has written. Because then, ulil albab. Allah goes on to say that when you read the pages of the book of nature and your imagination is fired off like this, they are eventually going to become a people of zikr. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم. And so the examination and enjoyment of the external phenomena in the universe is meant to lead to some internal reaction in the heart of remembrance of Allah. And after the child is triggered off for this zikr of Allah in the heart, and father and mother playing a role in this, then comes a higher stage, when now the child engages in thinking. First there was memory, and then there was imagination, and now there is thinking. وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And the child is now engaged in critical thinking of everything in the heavens and the earth. And would you believe that this is possible at age 40? Yes? My father was a school principal. May Allah have mercy on his soul. And he did not marry until he was age 40. He was waiting for someone, but it did not work. He waited and waited and waited for her, and then he said, I can't wait anymore. And then he went to the head of our Muslim community. He said, find me a wife. And that's how he married my mother. But during this time when he was working up to the age of 40, he would use his income and buy books. And he had an excellent library. He chose the books a lot of the books were imported from abroad. And my father never knew. He never knew it. He died when I was 15. And he died without knowing that when I was 12, from the age of 12, I would go down into his library. He would not know about it. And I would be reading these books on Islamic philosophy. It was a little difficult for me, the one on Islamic philosophy. But the books on Islamic history, they fired off my imagination. I went traveling all over the place while reading these books. And that was the age of 12 and 13 and 14. When he died at 15, he never knew what I was doing in his library. And so the imagination was built up at that time, reading these books. When you reach to the adult stage now, you have built a bank, a memory bank that is formidable. You have built up your imagination with the study, for example, of history, of battles fought long ago and this and that and the other. In these also, there are pages written by Allah, not just in the flowers and the birds and the mountains and the rivers, but also in history. And so when I went to Pakistan now to study, I went to Al-Azhar first at the age of 21. But at the age of 18, Maulana Muhammad Fadlur Rahman Ansari of Pakistan, he came to Karachi. I came to Trinidad. I was only 18 years of age. I go to the best college in the country. The best college in the country. And when this Maulana came to Trinidad, he was going to come to my village masjid to speak on Islam and science. I said, what nonsense is this? What connection could there be between Islam and science? What is this man going to come to talk about? I was skeptical. But when he started to speak, my mouth was open, and it remained open all to the end of the lecture. It took one lecture from a learned scholar of Islam, one, to change me. Because I had the background already. I could witness immediately, this is scholarship. And from that day, when I first listened to him, the desire was there in my heart for rising in the house of knowledge. And so when I went to Al-Azhar at the age of 21, I couldn't find anyone there with that kind of scholarship that he had. And so I left Al-Azhar and I went to study with him in Pakistan. And that was the best decision I ever took in my entire life. After studying with him and building up my critical faculties of thought and introducing me to the Quran and introducing me to how to study the Quran, I graduated, I went back home with a Pakistani education. How could this compare with an Oxford education? How could this compare with a Cambridge or Sorbonne or Harvard or Yale or MIT? They can't even compare with Qaidi Azam University. Darul Uloom, man. But this was not an ordinary Darul Uloom. This is tomorrow's lecture. So he said to me, when you go back to Trinidad, I don't want you to be a Maulana in a masjid and you give one bad khutbah, they fire you. I want you to earn your livelihood independently from your study, from your service to the mission of Islam, which is why I earn my livelihood from writing my books, and nobody can fire me. So I applied for a job in the foreign ministry, and they interviewed me. And they said, yes, we'd like to have you in the foreign ministry, but we want you to go back to university and study international relations. Imran has never studied international politics, kabhi nahi. Never studied international economics, kabhi nahi. Never studied international monetary economics, kabhi nahi. Never studied international law, never studied diplomacy in Islam, never studied history of international relations. No, never studied any of these subjects. And now I'm in the Institute of International Relations, which is a prestigious institute for diplomats from all over the Caribbean. And they're all graduates. You cannot enter this institute unless you're a graduate. And they are graduates from British universities and American universities and French universities and Canadian universities and pour me one Pakistani university. So they're all looking down at me. What is he doing here? And they're all diplomats, most of them. But more than that, when they heard my profile that I was a scholar of religion, what is this priest doing with us? We are scholars of international relations. We're going to be diplomats of the world. What is this priest doing? It's a square peg in a round hole. Then the classes started. And I was blessed to have as one of the director of the institute was Professor Leslie Manigat from Haiti. And he did his PhD in the Sorbonne, but he was not a conventional thinker. He was not a conventional thinker. He was anti-systemic in his thought, and he was able to unravel Western civilization and point out its oppression. And when that man started lecturing and teaching me international politics, and the others started teaching me international economics and so on, my eyes opened. I was like a fish in the ocean. I was loving it. And when the question and answer started in the classroom, I was the most intelligent in the class. There was no one even close to me. None. And when the end of the year exams are coming, we have to form small groups, small study groups. Everybody want me in their group. At the end of the year, the exams took place. I came first in the exams. The fellow who had the master's degree in economics from the London School of Economics, I beat him. When I never studied economics and politics before anything, what was the difference? The difference was that I grew up in a stable home. I didn't have a part-time mother. I had a father who devoted attention to the scholarship of his children, the training and education of his children, a responsible way. I had my father's library that I was reading from age 12. And then I had the master himself, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari Rahimahullah, teaching me. And I had the Quran, and I had more than that. I had the proper methodology for studying the Quran, which is tomorrow's lecture. And the whole class was left behind. They're not looking down anymore, the Pakistani education. This is a wake-up call for those who believe this is heaven. Britain is heaven, and the British education is the best in the world. And who wants to go back to Pakistan and study in Pakistan? So Nabi Muhammad والسلام, was weeping that morning when this revelation came down concerning the study of the external phenomena, the study of the pages of the book of nature that were written by Allah. Let me give you one page before we move on. Allah says in Surah An-Nuh, وَاللَّهُ أَنْبَتَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ نَبَاتًا. And Allah has caused you to grow forth from the earth like trees and plants. Grow forth from the earth like trees and plants. And I eventually found myself going for morning walks. That's before I started using the walking stick. I will go for walks in the morning in the valley of Santa Cruz in Trinidad, a beautiful valley. And I'll be observing the trees. And people would be passing by and say, oh, we never thought he would have ended up like this, because they find me talking to the trees. Who is this madman talking to the trees? Because the trees were speaking to me. I was communicating with the trees at that young age. When Allah said that He has caused us to grow forth from the earth like trees and plants, I had to study the trees. And when I studied the trees, then I began to understand human beings. That we're not all the same. No. In the same way that the trees are not all the same. And this is where the father and the mother and the teacher and the imam have a critical role to play. Because the children are before their eyes and they have to spot. This child is going to grow up as an ornamental tree. This child is going to grow up as a tree from which you will get timber to make furniture. This child is going to grow up to be a tree which will be like an umbrella to provide shade. This child will grow up to be a tree which will be a medicinal tree, because the trees are not all the same. And so the Quran led me to aptitude. We are not all the same. Allah has endowed us with different aptitudes, different gifts. And you have to be able to spot what is there in a child and then lead that child up, climb this ladder. This is your ladder. It was very clear from an early age that Allah had blessed me with something called insight. And He gave it to my father as well. And because they spotted this in me, that Allah had blessed me with insight. Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, as a great teacher, was able to build on that. Here is an example how by observing the external phenomena, the trees, you're able to learn about human beings. Now then, not only does Allah teach us with the book of nature, but after we have reached a certain age, and in my case, by age of 12, 13, 14, I was ready to go at that age. He also teaches us with another book, the pages which He has written. It's called the book of history. History is not just a story to be read. History is not moving in any direction it chooses to move, aimlessly. History is not just a record of events, but history also is an interpretation of events. And we must be able to connect the dots of history, to be able to understand the direction in which history is moving. Anyone with an elementary study of the movement of history would tell you this country is a sinking ship. Elementary. This ship is sinking. And when it sinks, it'll take all on board, underneath. All those on board will go with this when the ship sinks. When you look at the pages of the book of history of this country, this is perhaps the most fascinating country in the whole world, Britain, to study the history of this country. And if you study the history of this country all through, and you cannot recognize that this ship is sinking, you're blind. You're blind. When you study the pages of the book of history, then you're able, with insight, to connect the dots of history. Tomorrow night, we look and see how Islamic eschatology connects the dots of history, and the Darul Uloom is incapable of doing that. As you connect the dots of history and you understand the movement of history, you're able to anticipate what's coming tomorrow. That's scholarship. That is scholarship. To be able to anticipate what's coming tomorrow because you penetrated the reality of the world which confronts you today. Finally, Allah first taught you as a child with the pages of the book of nature. And then as you grew up to your adolescence and your imagination was fired up, He then taught you with the pages of the book of history. These are the social sciences. But when you reach adult, and when you have been reciting the Quran, which is my lecture on Jummah, inshallah, and Leicester, please try to come for that lecture. The Quran and the Moon, methodology for recitation of the Quran. When you've been doing that, then you qualify to study the Quran. And whoever studies the Quran and is blessed by Allah to penetrate that knowledge in the Quran which explains the world today, that is the only scholar of Akhiru Zaman. All the rest are peripherally important. This one is a khidr. And he is located in Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran. The one who is able to study the Quran and locate in the Quran that which explains the reality of the world today. And then find in the Quran the guidance with which to respond. That is the scholar. I don't know much of the Urdu language. And my Urdu pronunciation maybe could get you to laugh a little bit, but never mind. I did memorize one couplet of Iqbal, which is connected with this khidr. And what the Darul Uloom is not doing, they're not producing Iqbals. They're not producing khidr. He said, हजारों साल नरगिस अपनी बेनूरी पे रोती है, बड़ी मुश्किल से होता है चमन में दीद आवर पैदा. The deed hour is a khidr. The deed hour is a man of insight. And if we had deed hours, we would not be in the mess in which we are today, where Modi is scornfully castigating. Look at them, Pakistan, begging for money. Beggars. while the Indian economy is growing at a rate that wants to rival the United States, and putting us to shame and disgrace. If we had deed hours, we would not be in the pathetic state in which we are today. If we are to get out of this pathetic state, it's not this Darul Uloom. I'm not waging any boxing match with the Darul Uloom. Tomorrow's lecture, I'm not speaking disparagingly about them. All I'm saying is that education is deficient and inadequate. Even more than that, defective. And if you put all your resources in building more and more Darul Ulooms, more and more, you have 100, you make 1,000 in Britain, it's money being wasted because not going to change anything. And so the scholarship that I represent is from my teacher, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari. And we are actually involved in changing the house of knowledge in Islam. That's our task. We want to build a new house of knowledge in Islam, to produce a new scholar of Islam, a new model of Islamic scholarship, which will be able to turn to the Quran and get from the Quran that which explains the reality of the world today, and get from the Quran the guidance with which to respond to the predicament that we face today. And this is the country where I can do the work, because I don't speak French, although the terrain in France is very fertile because of the huge number of Algerians out there. And the Algerians are not as complex as the Pakistanis. No, the Algerians are not as complex as the Pakistanis. So it's easier to preach and teach the Algerians. And I don't have the fluency in Arabic to be able to go with the Arab world. In fact, I won't survive in the Arab world. No. So I can only do this work in the English-speaking world. If I go to Pakistan to do this, they'll not only shut the doors and masjid to me, they shut more than that. So I have to do it in Britain and with you. And I'm hoping and praying perhaps from these lectures I'm delivering that we can build a team. Tomorrow, for example, will make a difference for the world of Islam. All right, so I said on Friday, not Friday, Jummah in Leicester, if you come, we look at the beginning of the process of returning to the Quran, the beginning of the process, to rebuild this house of knowledge. And that is the Quran and the moon. The methodology for reciting the Quran. And you would love it. Oh yes, you would love it, you would love it, you would love it, and you'd want your children to apply it. And then on another occasion, Allah knows when, I can turn to the other subject, the Quran and the stars. Methodology for studying the Quran. Let us now end with a comment on Dajjal. His mission is to rule the world, and to rule the world from Jerusalem, rule the world from a holy state of Israel in Jerusalem, so that he can proclaim, I am the Messiah. All of this is in my book, Jerusalem in the Quran, which was written 20 years ago. And when he proclaims, I am the Masih, Ana al-Masih, and they all accepting, he'll rub his hands and he'll say, mission accomplished. I took them for a ride. I took them for a ride. In order for him to achieve this mission of ruling the world, he has to brainwash the world. And the process of brainwashing the world is most dangerous of all in education and knowledge. Here is his attack. It's a branch of knowledge called epistemology. And it is to the genius of Dr. Muhammad Iqbal that he recognized this attack that was epistemological. Epistemology is the branch of knowledge which studies knowledge, which studies the sources of knowledge. And when Iqbal wrote his reconstruction of religious thought in Islam, he devoted the first 2 chapters of that book to this subject. That knowledge does not come only from external observation and from experimentation and from rational inquiry. That is Dajjal. Dajjal says this is the only road to knowledge. Observation, experimentation, and rational inquiry. Dajjal goes on to say, if knowledge comes from any other source, it's not knowledge, it should be sent by Federal Express to a place called Disneyland. The Quran says, no, you're wrong. Knowledge comes from 2 sources, not one. Knowledge comes from external observation, and knowledge comes from internal knowledge that is internally received. And in the Quran, in Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran, when Akhiru Zaman comes, the last age, the only scholar who can unravel Akhiru Zaman and make sense of it is the one who is located at Majma'ul Bahrain. What is Majma'ul Bahrain? The places where the 2 oceans meet. The ocean of knowledge that is externally acquired, you got to do it, the exact sciences, and the ocean of knowledge that is internally received. What Dajjal did was to concentrate on the external knowledge. And because he has the jinn with him, and this is in the Quran, read my book. We don't have it at the back, it's coming. It should arrive in Britain in a week or so. Dajjal, the Quran, and the Jasad. If you read that book, you see the link between Dajjal and the jinn. He's able to bring about a scientific and technological revolution in the exact sciences, which leaves the rest of mankind spellbound, and uses this as the honey to trap the rest of mankind. And the scientific and technological revolution is so powerful that every time it takes a step, it changes the whole world. Nobody uses horses and donkeys anymore, and mules to transport goods and so on. You have the train now. You have the bus. You have the car. You have the aeroplane. This is what Dajjal has done. Okay. He also brings about a revolution in manufacturing, the industrial revolution, and this country is the heart of it, from Manchester. He changes the market with riba, and he sucks the wealth of mankind. It's actually stealing the wealth of mankind through a monetary system and a banking system, and amasses the wealth of the world in this civilization, and leave the rest of the world poor and destitute. And then people start coming to Dajjal for his bread. That's what our Prophet said. They will follow him for his bread. This is just a glimpse of the subject of Dajjal. He brings the feminist revolution to transform the world of women. And as he transforms the world of women, the family falls apart. And children become children of broken homes. And as a result, they grow up as broken individuals. He gives you television, and the images on the television screen keeps on moving rapidly, 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 rapidly. Why? Why is he putting the images on the television screen in rapid change? Because he wants to destroy your capacity to think. And last of all, before I end, our Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, that in the end time will move faster and faster. A whole year will pass, and it would appear to have been just a month. And a whole month like a week, and a whole week like a day, and a whole day like an hour, and a whole hour like the amount of time it takes to kindle a fire. And when I ask my audiences around the world, and I travel extensively, put your hands up if you are experiencing time moving faster and faster. Everybody put their hands up. So in Newport, only the Maulana sitting next to me. I said, mashallah, then the Maulana put his hands up. So everybody put their hands up. And I have to say to them, once you are experiencing time moving faster and faster, you are in danger. You are in danger. Your heart is not beating in harmony with the rest of Allah's creation. That is why you are experiencing time moving faster and faster. But in Leicester, we'll be able to take up this subject. Once you experience time moving faster and faster, you can't become a thinker. You cannot become a thinker, a mufakkir, much less a deed hour, because you'll only be shallow in your thinking. Shallow. So I say, take the television set and throw it out of the house. You don't need it. Take away the smartphone from your children, because now they're giving them homework and you have to use your smartphone to do the homework. That is Dajjal's plan. And send your children out, let them play in the garden, play in the parks, let them talk with the trees, let them play with the animals, okay? Build the memory bank, build the imagination of the child. You would be amazed at what a child can do. And the mother's lap is the first school. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will may bless Faisal for having the insight to choose this topic. And we pray that you may be of benefit from today's lecture, and this may make a difference for you and for your children. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين.
Well, Zafar here, extremely insightful and I guess mind-blowing lecture. And so much of that sort of resonated. I don't know where to start really, but I think the biggest thing for me is obviously the influence of technology. We're seeing it around us in our very homes, and even these guys who make the phones, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, they also prevent the children from using their own products until the age of 16. They must do that for a reason. I remember reading an article about a couple of years ago. It's a silly example, but it was we're talking about cricket, and they're saying all these statisticians. They're saying, England's batting is in decline and all this kind of stuff. They're saying that the only exception is Alistair Cook. This is the leading run scorer of all time, and they looked into that. Maybe the reason is that he's the only one without any social media. He's the only one without any technology, because it all does kind of link together. So may Allah allow us all to either become hitters and or races and So we've got the Q&A. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to bring the mic round. If I can ask you to keep the questions on topic and also just one at a time, so not to batch questions, and then if we have a time to come back around, then we'll do that. So who kind of wants to go first? Any questions? So I do have some that have been sent in as well. So I'll get started with one of them first, and then inshallah we'll, you guys can have a think. So let's open up.
You didn't have any problem with my Caribbean accent, did you?
So one example, one question that we've had is, shall Muslims open or start their own schools, institutions in Europe, and thereby be in a better position to hold on to their Islamic values, beliefs and traditions in today's godless European society?
The answer is you do not control power. They control power. And as a consequence, even if you build your Islamic school, the law requires you to teach in your school that a man can marry another man and get a marriage certificate. And if you do not teach it, they'll close down your school. Then what will you do? Who will you complain to? Me? Huh? So I don't think you can beat this system. On the contrary, I am convinced the ship is sinking. And none can stop the ship from sinking. Because in the Quran, Allah has said that He's going to punish. This is His punishment. And it's going to be the worst punishment ever. Su'ul azab. So what is happening here is divine punishment. And you cannot change this divine punishment. This ship is sinking. So I would make hijrah. I'll take my children out. I'll take my wife out. But the ones who will refuse to go, once they come here, is the wife and children. They don't want to go. Papa, you could go. We're staying here. Papa, you can go. We are staying here. When you hear that, you know you've been defeated. Too late now.
I'll just start off. One of the arguments that I hear quite a lot, specifically when I speak to Jamaat Tablighi, is they say if we all do hijrah, who's going to do the dawah to the people? Islam is still relevant in Europe, Great Britain. So if we was to all move out and move away from the ship, then who will sail the ship?
Tell Tabligh Jamaat, I am doing dawah. Tell Tabligh Jamaat, I am doing dawah, but I don't reside here. I always try not to spend more than 3 weeks. This is the first time I'm spending more than 3 weeks. So I come, I do dawah, and I leave. And my dawah is reaching more people than the Tabligh dawah because of the internet. So this argument is invalid. Yeah, this argument is valid. I wouldn't live in this country, no? And I most certainly would not allow my children to grow up in this country, not at all. Yeah.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shazad. It's a pleasure and an honor to be in your company. From a global standpoint, how do we stem the influence of the Dajjalic system on education and thus core values in the developing world in the current geopolitical climate?
I remember Professor Dr. Ishtiyaq Hosein Qureshi, eminent Pakistani historian. He was the Vice Chancellor of Karachi University when I was a student. And students who studied at Karachi University had a compulsory, in your first year, you had a compulsory course in Islamic studies. But nobody wanted to attend it. It was very boring. The teachers who used to come to teach it could not fire the imagination of the people here. And these were all university students who wanted knowledge. And then Dr. Ishtiyaq Hussain Qureshi then called on my teacher, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari, for help. And the Maulana was just one in a million. You couldn't get more teachers like that. So he would go to the auditorium, not to the classroom. And in the auditorium, the students would be packed in the auditorium. And when he lectured on Islam in the auditorium, he was able to penetrate, he was able to command the respect of these young Pakistanis studying at the university. How can we do that? Not just in the developing world, but elsewhere. I will argue tomorrow night that the house of knowledge in Islam today is defective. And that is the Darul Uloom and the graduates of the Darul Uloom. And I will argue, which my teacher also argued, that we need a new model of Islamic scholarship, and a new model of an institution to study Islam. He said this in the 1950s and 1960s, which is how much, 70, 80 years ago. That's when he said it. And in the 1960s, he established the Alimia Institute of Islamic Studies in Karachi. And I left Al-Azhar, yes, to go there, to study with him. And I've always said this was the best decision I ever took in my life. In that institute, I had to study, you wouldn't believe this, the philosophy of history. Yeah. I had Dr. Burhan Ahmad Farooqi, a PhD in philosophy, an eminent scholar. And he taught me the philosophy of history. I had to study, as a student in this institute, I had to study the philosophy of science. And when I studied the philosophy of history, I had to know what is the Islamic philosophy of history. What is the Islamic philosophy of science? And he brought one of Pakistan's most eminent scientists, Professor Sayyid Sibti Nabi Naqvi. He didn't care two peanuts that this man was a Shia or this man is a Sunni. What he was concerned about is that the man had the scholarship to teach. And that's how they came in. Then he brought for me Yusuf Salim Chishti, who is the foremost scholar in Iqbal studies, the heads and shoulders above all the rest. And Yusuf Salim Chishti came to teach me at this institute. So this was not your normal Darul Uloom. If this scholarship today is commanding respect, not just in Britain, but in other parts of the world, it's because of Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari. Now he's gone, Allah have mercy on his soul, and I am one man doing this work, and I have now expanded from his teachings to begin establish a new branch of knowledge. So what we need now is young men who would be fired up, and I want to be part of this team. I want to build this new world of knowledge in the world of Islam, recognizing that the Darul Uloom cannot do it. Okay? And if we work for it, can we succeed?
Inshallah.
Shall I tell you what the Prophet said? Alayhi salatu wasalam. He said, my ummah is like the rain. I do not know which shower is better, the first or the last. Yes. So there is a world of Islamic scholarship that's coming that will dazzle the world. Yes, dazzle the world. And we're working for that now.
It's indeed a great honor to sit in your presence and to hear you. You're like a role model for us. Also, I want to tell you that you are being listened. I can tell you about in Karachi, in Pakistan, and big scholars like Oya Babu Jan and Zaid Hafid, which are most related to current events, are listening to you, and we are in the progress of updating our education system, and you've seen what we are doing in Pakistan. It's a work in progress. We've made our country for Islam. We have done a lot of things for Islam, and it's not it's a work in progress. I completely understand your views that we still have not reached where we have to reach, but we in Pakistan, we believe that we will raise the flag of Islam once again, and through your brilliant teaching, we'll do that, and very happy that you will do some teaching here in UK, and I'll take that back home. My family is very connected, and I take it back to the people that I know, all the things that I learned from you. Thank you.
Don't invite me to Pakistan. We have to do the work from here. Yeah. One minute, please, yeah, before. I'm actually working in Britain for Pakistan. I cannot do this work in Pakistan. They will cut me down, but they can't cut me down here. So I'm sending the message to Pakistan from Britain. And the most important part of this message is the methodology for studying the Quran. It is when we use that methodology for studying the Quran that we recognize some of the mistakes that we are making. Let me share with you one mistake. The Quran does not guide us to approach the Bible with a sword. It does not guide us to approach the Hindu Vedas with a sword in your hand. And yet our ignorance is so profound that when a scholar comes with a sword in his hand to rip up the Bible and rip up the Vedas, we applaud him. What a great scholar he is. On the contrary, the Quran teaches us to approach the scriptures of other people with respect. And when you approach those scriptures, you look for what remnant of truth still remains in those scriptures, rather than looking for what you can criticize and condemn. And when you find a remnant of truth in their scriptures, you recognize it as truth. And if they are not following it, you take it to them and say to them, brother, this is the truth in your scripture that you have forgotten. I never grew up in a society which hated Hindus. It was foreign to me. I grew up with Hindus around me, and they were men of integrity, men of knowledge, men of character. Yes. And I did not know until I went outside of Trinidad that a Muslim has so much hatred for Hinduism and he speaks such vile comments about Hindus and such nasty things about Hindus. And then when I try gently so to teach them to approach the Hindu scriptures with respect, yes, there are many things in the Hindu scriptures which are wrong. But if you can find something of truth, then why don't you go there first? And they jump on my back like a bunch of monkeys with daggers in their hands, and they stabbing me from all directions. He's a lover of the Hindus. Just because I condemn approaching the scripture with a sword in your hand. That's all. Show respect for the Hindu religion, and if you have to differ with them, you have to correct them. Allah says, do it with His wisdom. Do it in a graceful way, not with a boxing match. How can I reach the Pakistani people if you allow yourselves to be brainwashed with hatred and enmity and venom in your heart for the Hindu religion? India today has the worst government it has ever had in its history. Those who murdered and assassinated Gandhi are the same ones who are now ruling the country. They are destroying the Hindu religion. And because I say this, they are destroying the Hindu. The Pakistani people are up in arms against me. Why should I say that? Strange. If the Mughals built a masjid at Babri, and the Hindus come to me and say, this is where our God Ram was born, I am not going to ask you for evidence, go to the court, prove it. No. Out of respect for your religious consciousness, it's only 2.5 acres of land, that's all. Out of respect for your religious consciousness, I would renounce all claim to Babri. 2,000 people have already been killed, and they're still fighting in the court. But this is not how our people were. Let me take you back to a page of history. The British were in India. The Muslims wanted them out. And the Muslims established the Khilafat movement. And it was led by men who knew Islam and who lived Islam. I don't have to mention the names for you. And they wanted that when the British leave, we will live as Muslims. The Hindus were led by a man who was a sincere Hindu, Gandhi. Nehru was not like that. He is a secular nationalist, but Gandhi is a real Hindu. And Gandhi said, but that's the same thing I want. I want the British out. And when the British leave, I want that the Hindus should live in accordance with Hinduism. Of course, the British don't want that. So Gandhi went to the Khilafat movement. And he said to Maulana Abdul Bari, why don't we make an alliance, a Hindu-Muslim alliance? Maulana Abdul Bari and the Khilafat movement were very happy. Yes. Gandhi said, I have one condition. Stop killing the cow. Maulana Abdul Bari said, deal, we stop killing the cow. That's the kind of Muslim we had. That's the kind of Muslim we had. The leader of the Khilafat movement agreed. We will stop killing the cow so that a Muslim-Hindu alliance could be established. Today, they will jump on his back and murder him for saying we will stop killing the cow. This is the kind of jahiliyyah we have to deal with today. Yes, we pray that Allah might help us to get out of it.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I would like to know, to what extent do you think the challenges that we are facing here as Muslims within the education system will perhaps surely or slowly but surely, will that be a worldwide problem within the education system?
Oh yes, Dajjal is a worldwide phenomenon. Dajjal is a worldwide phenomenon. The only difference between this country and the rest of the world is that in this country you come and you say, this is heaven. This is heaven. And we don't want to go back to hell. And those out there saying, we're living in hell. We wish we could come to heaven. This is the brainwashing which has occurred around the world. And our Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, Dajjal will come to two things. What are the two?
Fire.
Huh?
Fire and water.
That's right, a river and a fire. Dajjal will come with two things, a river and a fire. And whosoever falls in his river will have his load of sins increased. And whosoever falls in his fire will have his load of sins decreased. In other words, Dajjal will take the road to heaven and make it look like the road to hell. And he take the road to hell and make it look like the road to heaven and deceive all of mankind, and they're rushing down the road thinking it's the road to heaven when in fact it's the road to hell. So the only difference between this country and the rest is here they believe they're in heaven, and over there they wish they could come to heaven.
So there's two questions from the crowd. The first one is, if we have to make hijrah to a different country, which country's education system is the right one?
For this gathering here, I will go back to Pakistan. Oh yes. I don't know whether you can get real naan over here. But when I go to Pakistan, even the roadside shops with the earthen oven, and you eat that naan, you immediately become hungry. That's naan, okay? So I will go back to Pakistan. And I will strive to rebuild Pakistan to what the Khilafat movement wanted. The Khilafat movement was more faithful to Islam than the All India Muslim League. No one can challenge me on that at all. Don't bother to try. The Khilafat movement was more faithful to the model of Islam, the model of a state in Islam, than the All India Muslim League. Pakistan was born as a consequence, as a replica of Turkey, modern republican state. But if Gandhi had not been assassinated, and if the rug had not been pulled out from below the Khilafat movement by Mustafa Kemal, and I'm sorry to have to say it, but also by Dr. Iqbal, and the Khilafat movement had remained, Pakistan would have been born differently. But the big war is coming. And after the big war takes place, then you have a chance now. You now have a chance to return to the Khilafat movement and launch a struggle for the model of a state which is in the Quran. So I'll go back to Pakistan and I'll struggle for that. Yeah.
So one more question, and then we'll have another one from the crowd. In this modern world, where men and women both work to make ends meet, what is the best solution for raising the children? How long should the mom stay with the children? Any tips or solutions when it's difficult to stay afloat financially in this day and age in the UK?
Where both father and mother have to work because of poverty, then you have to live as a family. The different families have to come together, okay, like a village. So when mommy has to be away from home, it's a sister or a cousin or grandma, so the whole family comes together. So the child will not have this impact upon him of negligence, no. This is how the village used to live in the past. The village would come together when a mother could not take care of her child. And that is not possible in a modern society. Everybody's at work. Everybody at work. Everybody busy. So you have to put the child in a daycare center. And when the child grows up, and you now are an old man and an old woman, guess what the child does with you? Huh? Yes, the child pays you back for what you did to the child. The child will put you in a home for old people. And that's where you live. Because you neglected them when they were babies, so they neglect you when you're old people, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. MashaAllah, lovely teaching. I've been listening to you about 4 or 5 years. Memorized some of your lectures, especially Juju.
You memorized some of my lectures. Wow, look at that.
All the time I'm a taxi driver, 8-hour shift or long job, Imran.
Okay.
The question is this, like, mainly I talk to the imams in the mosque. And when I say to them, right, look, this world is controlled by Juju Majud. Muslim world failed to make us understand the Quran. And they got angry. They closed their right eye and they looked me with the left eye and they called me, here's the Juju Majud. So many got angry, like one of the guys, he's teaching young imam. When I told him, right, look, the imams and the scholars of Islam have failed. That's why the Muslims are in this situation. The non-Muslims use our hadith, black blacks, and they use in Syria and all that. This is fault of imams, which is not explaining us the real Quran and the hadith mutashabihah. So they gave me names. Some they called me Juju Majud because I tell them, right, this is the situation of the world. Why don't you give khutbah instead of focusing on the firqas and all that? Mainly in our mosques, they talk about this, or this, that. So nobody is talking on Dajjal or Juju Majud, but so when like person like me says to them, look, this world is controlled by Juju Majud, or Dajjal is around the corner, they think, what are you talking about? So what shall we do about these people, especially these imams? Like when you say to them you are failure, they get angry.
Yeah, good question. I have developed a strategy. And my strategy is, I'm sure, inshallah, will be successful.
Inshallah.
My strategy is two-pronged. I'm going to devote primary attention to this subject and then to this subject. Only these two. And eschatology, I put it back, let it stay for a while. Number one, the Quran and the moon. Methodology for reciting the Quran. They do not have an answer to me. They cannot answer me on this subject. The Quran and the moon. Methodology for reciting the Quran, because they're reciting the Quran wrong. And I'm correcting them. And people who listen and who read my book will recognize this is correct. So you're on a winning battle here. They have to submit. Then comes the second attack. The Quran and the stars, methodology for study of the Quran. If I spend the remaining years of my life only with these two, my students will teach the eschatology. But this is the battleground. If we win this battleground, we finish. We've done our job. If we win this battleground. Methodology for reciting the Quran and methodology for study of the Quran. So my book is already at the back, methodology for study of the Quran. I just have to make a change in the title. That is the Quran and the stars, okay? Methodology for study of the Quran. And this book, I'm almost finished with it. The Quran and the moon, which is Jummah. You listened to it in Leicester. Methodology for recitation of the Quran. It's a beautiful subject. Oh, beautiful.